We are very fortunate to be joined this morning by a journalist for Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, whose reporting, by the way, we have relied on quite a bit throughout the coverage post-October 7th. Amir T-Bone, he is also the author of a book called The Gates of Gaza. Great to see you, Amir.
Good to see you.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Let's go ahead and put your reporting here up on the screen. Prime Minister Netanyahu is traveling to the U.S. He will be the first foreign leader to visit Trump in his new term. And your headline here is Netanyahu comes to Washington to kill Trump's Gaza deal. Will the president let him? So what have you been able to learn about the dynamics between Trump and Bibi in advance of this meeting?
Well, it's clear that President Trump takes great pride in getting the Gaza ceasefire that the previous president failed to achieve for more than a year. And President Trump secured a ceasefire and hostage release deal even before entering the White House. He and his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, who has earned a lot of respect here in Israel, did a lot of hard work to get this deal. But this deal is built in a very, very sophisticated, perhaps too sophisticated of a way. And a month from today, it is supposed to move from the first phase of the deal, during which Hamas is supposed to release 33 of our hostages. They've already released more than 10, and we are waiting for more and more of the hostages to arrive. But then we're supposed to move into phase 2, during which all the remaining living hostages, more than 20 of them, including 2 personal friends of mine, are supposed to be released, and Israel is supposed to complete its withdrawal from Gaza. And this phase of the deal threatens the survival of Netanyahu's governing coalition, which relies on several extremist, fanatic parties that are threatening to blow up the governing coalition and basically end Netanyahu's hold on power if he goes through. So he's caught in a situation where on the one hand, there's the survival of his coalition, on the other hand, the survival of the hostages, and smack in the middle is President Trump, who wants this deal to continue and wants it to be the basis for a broader Middle East agenda centered around Israeli-Saudi peace that, first of all, requires an end to the war in Gaza.
So, Amir, can you pair this with some comments you reported on there that Trump had floated, for example? He's like, oh, well, maybe the Palestinians can temporarily go to Jordan or Egypt. And I believe since that comment, the governments of all of those countries have come forward and said that's an absolute non-starter. So in terms of the fork in the road, I guess, if you will, for the actual decisions that the Trump administration has to make, they have to decide whether Steve Witkoff and others will continue negotiations and push for a phase 2 or to support a continuation of the war in Gaza. Are there any other options on the table, realistically?
I think the idea that Trump floated that some of the Palestinians in Gaza will, from my understanding, temporarily seek residence in a neighboring country until all the destruction in Gaza can be removed and new housing can be built. And the reconstruction in Gaza from this war is going to take years. This is a very difficult situation. That's obviously a suggestion that none of the neighboring Arab countries like Egypt and Jordan are willing to hear about right now. But if it is presented as part of a package that ends the war, that moves us toward Palestinian statehood, that includes guarantees that all of these people will be able to return to Gaza, no Israeli settlements built in Gaza, complete Israeli withdrawal, maybe then it will sound different. Obviously, when he just says it on the plane and, with some reporters who don't really know the nuance of this issue. And to be frank, I'm not sure he knows all the nuance at this point either. But comes and says, oh, we want them to move to Egypt. So, of course, everybody's rising up and saying, no way we're going to accept that. The Egyptians, the Jordanians, the Palestinians, we saw over the weekend the Saudis and the Qataris, very important countries in this whole process also coming out against it. So I think if Trump has a real idea here that he wants to sell to the relevant Arab countries, it needs to be part of a broader package. And it needs to be explained as part of a move to end the war, reconstruct Gaza, and put us on a path to Palestinian statehood, which is supposed to be part of this grand Israeli-Saudi deal that he's trying to get. So there's a lot of diplomatic ideas floating around right now. And I think we should treat every statement we hear with a bit of caution at this moment.
Yeah, we can put F2 up on the screen, which underscores what you all were saying, that there was a widespread rejection from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Egypt, Jordan, the Palestinian Authority, and the Arab League all said in a joint statement they oppose President Trump's plan to move Palestinians from Gaza under any excuse. The language, of course, that he used, saying we need to, quote, clean that whole thing out, something along those lines.
That's like real estate language. That's not diplomatic language.
Right. Well, I mean, it's ethnic cleansing language is effectively what it is. And how could anybody, given that you have within, the Netanyahu coalition, Netanyahu himself, these extremists who are quite open about, we want to push out the Palestinians. We want to completely settle and take over not just Gaza, but also the West Bank. How could you ever have any assurance that this wasn't just, an attempt at a final, complete ethnic cleansing of both Gaza and the West Bank?
So I think one of the things President Trump is going to learn as he navigates this issue is that the current coalition in Israel is not going to make his life easier in any way. Because that's just the example you gave now, where an idea that could be presented with the right language, with the right assurances, with the right funding, as a temporary solution that allows to rebuild Gaza and then prepare better housing for all the people who lost their homes in this war. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands, potentially more than 1 million people who lost their homes. That kind of plan will immediately run into a wall of suspicion because it is being associated with people like Bezalel Smotrich, the far-right finance minister of the current Netanyahu government, who is openly celebrating the idea of emptying Gaza from its residents. And once he makes that kind of statement, then automatically you're going to see all of the relevant Arab countries coming and saying, we want nothing to do with it. And Smotrich is right now pressuring Netanyahu. As we're speaking, he put out a statement that if Netanyahu agrees to end the war, so that we can go into phase 2 of the hostage negotiations and save the remaining hostages, he's blowing up the government. And it's important to understand that for the hostage families in Israel, and I know many of them personally, and I'm talking here about friends of mine and their families, they see President Trump and Stephen Witkoff as their last source of hope, literally the light at the end of the tunnel. Because we know some of these hostages are being held in inhumane conditions, in tunnels underground, being starved, being tortured. And then comes President Trump and Stephen Witkoff, and they put together this deal that says within 3 phases, all the hostages are released, the war ends, Israel withdraws from Gaza, and this is over. And instead of saying, well, okay, this is the way to do it, now we're seeing politicians from within our government pressuring Netanyahu to say no. And not only that, to try to convince Trump himself to disregard the deal that he was so proud of just 2 weeks ago when he entered office.
So, Amir, this is my big question then, is does Trump have the political ability, Steve Witkoff and others, who are, by the way, I'm not sure if you're aware, are under major attack in our country. Also, people who are aligned with the Israeli far right. Well, do they have the ability to force any of that? Because as you said, if the government falls, there's no guarantee what comes next. What does that scenario look like? Or is there some thread the needle scenario where Trump does force Netanyahu to take this deal, continue the Steve Witkoff and other negotiations that does not lead to the falling of the government? Or is that just simply inevitable?
So I think President Trump is surrounded by a lot of people who are blind admirers of Netanyahu and are perhaps not giving the president the best advice possible. For example, Netanyahu and his right-hand man, Ron Dermer, will probably tell President Trump that they can't follow through with the ceasefire because the government will fall apart, and that this is bad for Trump because it will cause a stalemate in the Middle East. But if you actually check very simple press statements being made out in the open in Israel, you will see that the leaders of the important opposition parties today, not a month ago, came out and said that if Netanyahu loses his majority because of the hostage deal, because of the ceasefire, they will give him temporary support for at least several months so that he doesn't lose power and the hostage and ceasefire deal collapses.
Wow.
Which means that any other claim is a lie. Now, Netanyahu prefers the far-right coalition that is against the hostage deal because that gives him the potential to hold power for another 2 years. That's why he prefers it. But from President Trump's point of view, he should know that if Netanyahu comes and says, I can't do this deal for political reasons, that's not true. He will get a few months of support from the opposition to complete the hostage release and ceasefire deal, because for the vast majority of Israelis, the release of the hostages is today the #1 priority. This is something that unites a huge percentage of the population. We want to see them come back home and end this night. Now, I don't know if there will be enough people around President Trump who are strong enough and knowledgeable enough about our internal politics to present the facts to him in a way that overcomes the spin and the excuses that he will hear from Netanyahu.
Yeah.
But I'm confident that if President Trump insists on this, we will see the deal come through. There will be ceasefire, the hostages will return, and Netanyahu will find a way to manage it politically with the opposition parties here in Israel.
He seems to always find a way to survive one way or another. Amir, thank you so much for your analysis today.
Thank you, Amir. Very helpful.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.